There is a particular kind of discouragement that visits people who genuinely want their lives to matter. Not the discouragement of those who have given up entirely, but the discouragement of those who look at the scope of their actual daily existence, the small tasks, the limited sphere, the unglamorous repetition, and wonder if anything they do actually counts for anything at all. You wake up and make breakfast. You answer emails. You do laundry. You have the same conversation with the same person you had yesterday. You complete tasks that will need to be done again tomorrow. You move through hours that feel indistinguishable from the hours before them. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question whispers with increasing insistence, "Is this it? Is this what my life amounts to?" These small, forgettable, apparently meaningless actions repeated endlessly until I die. If you have ever felt this, you are not alone. And you are standing exactly where Saint Thérèse of Lisieux stood when she discovered something that would transform not only her own life, but the lives of millions who came after her. She discovered that the entire spiritual edifice of holiness, the whole massive architecture of becoming a saint, could rest on something as small as a pin. Not metaphorically, actually, a literal pin. Let me ask you something gently. What if the size of your actions has nothing to do with their significance? What if God measures differently than you do? What if the tiny deed you dismiss as too small to matter is actually the exact place where heaven is breaking into your ordinary life, and you keep missing it because you are waiting for something bigger, something more impressive, something that feels worthy of the word spiritual? This is not a comforting platitude meant to make you feel better about an insignificant life. This is the radical discovery that reshaped Thérèse's entire understanding of holiness and offers a way forward for everyone who feels trapped in ordinariness, convinced their small life could never produce the greatness they sense they were created for. Because Thérèse learned that greatness is not found by escaping the small. It is found by entering it so completely, with such love, with such total presence, that the small becomes a doorway to the infinite. That a single pin picked up with the right intention can carry more spiritual weight than grand gestures performed for recognition. That God is not waiting for you to do something impressive. He is waiting for you to notice Him in the unimpressive things you are already doing. Have you ever picked up a pin from the floor? Of course you have. Everyone has. It is one of the most forgettable actions imaginable. So small it barely registers. So quick it leaves no trace. So ordinary that mentioning it in conversation would seem absurd. But Thérèse mentions it. She writes about it in her autobiography as if it were a spiritual breakthrough. She describes bending down to pick up a pin someone dropped, not because she needed it, not because it was her responsibility, but simply because it was there and picking it up was a small act of service. And in that moment, in the single second it took to bend, grasp, and straighten, she encountered God. Not in a mystical vision, not in a dramatic interior locution, but in the quiet recognition that this tiny deed, done purely for love, mattered to Him, that He saw it, that He received it as a gift, that in His economy there is no such thing as a meaningless action when the action is animated by love. Most people read this story and think it is charming, sweet, maybe a little naive. They admire Thérèse's piety, but assume this kind of spirituality is for simpler souls, for people who are content with small things because they lack the capacity for great ones. But this is a complete misreading. Thérèse was not content with small things because she lacked ambition. She had enormous ambition. She wanted to be a saint. She wanted to love God with heroic intensity. She wanted her life to matter eternally. The difference was that she discovered how to fulfill that ambition, not by waiting for opportunities to do great things, but by doing small things with great love. This is not the same as settling. This is not resignation disguised as spirituality. This is the most radical form of spiritual ambition possible. The ambition to make every single moment, every single action, every single breath an offering to God, regardless of whether anyone else ever notices or whether the action itself seems significant by worldly standards. Let me ask you honestly, how many pins have you walked past today? How many small opportunities for love have you dismissed because they seemed too trivial to bother with? How many moments have you let pass without offering them to God because they did not feel spiritual enough, important enough, worthy enough of the word prayer? Thérèse would say you are walking past treasure. You are stepping over the very things that could transform your ordinary life into something luminous. Not because the actions themselves are impressive, but because love has the power to transfigure anything it touches, even something as small as a pin. This is the first truth about tiny deeds. They are not small to God. They only feel small to you because you are measuring by the wrong standard. You are measuring by impact, by visibility, by the world's definition of significance. But God measures by love. And love does not require scale. It does not need grandeur. It does not wait for impressive circumstances. Love can inhabit a moment as brief as bending to pick up a pin. And when it does, that moment becomes eternal. It enters the economy of grace. It participates in the redemption of the world. It adds something real and lasting to the communion of saints. This sounds impossible to people trained to think that only big actions matter. They want to do something significant for God. They want their lives to count. And so they wait for the opportunity that feels worthy of their effort. The mission trip, the ministry position, the dramatic conversion, the visible sacrifice. And while they wait, they miss the pins. The 1,000 small opportunities each day presents to love without recognition, to serve without reward, to give without keeping score. They miss the entire field where holiness is actually grown because they are looking for a different field, a more impressive one where their efforts will be seen and celebrated. But Thérèse discovered that the field you are standing in right now is the field. The small tasks filling your day are not obstacles to holiness. They are the material of it. The unglamorous repetition is not wasted time. It is the very place where you learn to love when love costs something invisible. Have you ever considered that the reason your life feels ordinary might not be because you are doing the wrong things, but because you have not yet learned to see what you are already doing with the eyes of love? That the significance you are searching for in some future achievement is actually available in the present moment, if you would stop dismissing it as too small to matter. This is what the power of a single pin reveals. Not that you should be satisfied with small accomplishments, but that in God's kingdom, there are no small accomplishments when the motive is love. There are only opportunities, some dramatic and rare, most ordinary and constant, to offer yourself completely in whatever form the moment requires. And the moment right now? It might require nothing more than a pin. The question is whether you will bend down to pick it up, whether you will offer even that small gesture to God, whether you will trust that He sees, He receives, and He is building something eternal out of materials so humble, the world would never notice them at all. There is a specific challenge that comes with embracing the spirituality of tiny deeds, and it is a challenge most people do not anticipate until they actually try to live this way. The challenge is not doing the small things. That part is easy. The small things are everywhere, unavoidable, filling every day whether you want them or not. The challenge is doing them without needing them to feel significant. Because here is what happens when you first hear about Thérèse's little way, when you first understand that holiness can be found in picking up a pin or smiling at a difficult person or sweeping a floor with complete presence. You feel inspired, energized. You think, yes, I can do this. I can transform my ordinary life by bringing this kind of intention to small things. And then you try it. You pick up the pin. You smile at the difficult person. You sweep the floor with attention and love. And nothing happens. You feel nothing. The action remains small. It does not feel spiritual. It does not produce any sense of accomplishment or progress. You did it. It is over. And your life looks exactly the same as it did before. This is the moment most people quit, because they realize that doing tiny deeds with love does not produce the feelings they expected. It does not make you feel holy. It does not give you the sense that you are doing something important. It just feels like picking up a pin, like smiling, like sweeping. Have you experienced this disappointment? Have you tried to live intentionally in small things only to discover that intentionality does not automatically translate into satisfaction? That you can offer something to God with genuine love and still feel completely ordinary afterward. This is not failure. This is the exact point where the spirituality of tiny deeds either deepens into something real or collapses into a technique you tried once and abandoned. Because what you are discovering in that disappointment is something crucial. You are still seeking the feeling of significance rather than the reality of it. You are still measuring success by your internal experience rather than by the objective truth of what love accomplishes, regardless of how it feels. Thérèse faced this constantly. She describes doing acts of charity for sisters who never thanked her, who never even noticed. She describes smiling at people who irritated her and receiving no reward except the knowledge that she had chosen love over self-protection. She describes offering her suffering to God and feeling no consolation, no sense that the offering had been received, no emotional confirmation that it mattered. But she kept offering anyway, not because it felt good, not because she could measure the results, but because she had learned to trust something deeper than feelings, the objective reality that every act of love, regardless of its size or the feelings it produces, participates in the love of God and therefore has eternal value. Let me ask you something that might be uncomfortable. Can you love without needing to feel the love? Can you serve without needing to see the results? Can you offer tiny deeds to God day after day, year after year, without any emotional confirmation that what you are doing matters? This is where the spirituality of tiny deeds becomes demanding. Not physically demanding, the actions themselves are easy, but spiritually demanding, because it requires you to build your life on faith rather than feelings, to trust that God receives what you offer even when you feel nothing, to persist in love even when love produces no sense of satisfaction, no visible fruit, no evidence that you are making progress. Most people cannot sustain this. They need feedback. They need to feel like what they are doing is working. They need some sign that their efforts are producing results, that they are advancing spiritually, that the small things they are offering actually add up to something meaningful. But this need for feedback is exactly what keeps them trapped in the economy of achievement rather than entering the economy of love. Because achievement can be measured, love often cannot. Achievement produces visible results. Love sometimes produces nothing visible at all. Achievement lets you track progress. Love asks you to trust that progress is happening even when you cannot see it. This is why the pin matters so much to Thérèse's spirituality. Because a pin is so small that it produces no measurable feedback. You cannot build an identity around being someone who picks up pins. You cannot track your spiritual progress by counting them. You cannot point to a pile of pins at the end of your life and say, "Look what I accomplished." The pin forces you to let go of the need for significance and simply love. To do the small thing purely because it is an opportunity to offer love, not because it will make you feel holy or prove your worth or produce any result you can point to. Have you ever done something kind that no one saw and no one thanked you for? That produced no change in your circumstances and no warm feeling in your heart? That was simply an act of love offered into apparent emptiness? If so, you have touched what Thérèse is teaching. You have encountered the strange poverty of tiny deeds, the poverty that comes from offering something so small that it cannot sustain your ego, cannot feed your need for recognition, cannot prove anything about yourself to yourself or others. But in that poverty, something else becomes possible, something most people never experience because they never let go of the need for their actions to feel significant. In that poverty, love becomes pure. It is no longer mixed with self-interest, no longer contaminated by the desire for reward, no longer performed partly for God and partly for the satisfaction of feeling like a good person. It is just love. Small, hidden, unimpressive love. But love nonetheless. And in God's economy, this love, this tiny, thankless, unrewarded love, is worth more than all the spectacular achievements performed partly for recognition. This is the second truth about tiny deeds. They purify love by stripping away everything except the choice to give. They reveal whether you are serving God or serving your need to feel significant. They separate the love that depends on results from the love that simply loves regardless. Thérèse understood this. She knew that the pins, the smiles, the hidden sacrifices were not impressive by any worldly measure. She knew that her life would look small to anyone observing from the outside. But she had stopped caring whether her life looked impressive. She cared only whether it was loving. And she discovered that the smaller the deed, the purer the love required to sustain it. Let me ask you one more time. Are you willing to love in ways no one will ever see? To offer tiny deeds that produce no feelings of accomplishment? To build your entire spiritual life on actions so small the world would never notice them, and you yourself might forget them an hour later? This is what it means to find God in tiny deeds. Not to feel Him there. Often you will not. Not to see results. Usually you will not. But to trust that He receives every offering of love, no matter how small, and that these offerings are building something eternal, even when they produce nothing you can measure in time. The pins add up. Not because you are counting them, but because God is. And in His counting, nothing offered in love is ever lost, never wasted, always held and treasured and woven into the fabric of redemption in ways you will not understand until you see with His eyes, rather than your own. There is a moment in Thérèse's writings where she addresses directly the question that haunts everyone who hears about the little way. But what about the great saints? What about the missionaries, the martyrs, the reformers who changed the world? If holiness is about tiny deeds, does that mean their grand accomplishments did not matter? Does it diminish what they achieved? And Thérèse's answer is both brilliant and liberating. The great saints did great things, yes. But their greatness was not in the scale of their actions. It was in the love with which they performed them. A missionary who converts thousands while loving poorly is less holy than a hidden soul who picks up a pin with complete love. The size of the deed is irrelevant. What matters is whether love is the motive, the energy, the entire reason the action exists at all. This means that the playing field of holiness is completely leveled. You do not need extraordinary circumstances to become a saint. You do not need exceptional opportunities. You do not need the gifts, the platform, the resources that allow some people to accomplish visible great things. You only need love. And the capacity to love is distributed equally to every soul regardless of circumstance. The person washing dishes in obscurity has the same opportunity for holiness as the person preaching to thousands, if the dishes are washed with love, and the preaching is animated by the same love. Have you ever felt disqualified from holiness because your life is too ordinary? Because you do not have the gifts or opportunities that allow for impressive spiritual accomplishments? Because your circumstances are too limited, your sphere too small, your daily tasks too mundane for anything you do to really count? Thérèse would say this feeling is based on a complete misunderstanding of how holiness works. You are not disqualified. You are simply operating with the wrong measure. You are judging your life by scale when God judges it by love. And by that measure, the only measure that matters eternally, your ordinary life is overflowing with opportunities for greatness that you have been dismissing as insignificant. Every interaction, every task, every moment, every single one is an opportunity to love, to offer yourself, to give God something, even if that something is as small as a pin, animated purely by the desire to please Him, to serve Him, to participate in His love for the world. And when you begin to see your life this way, everything changes. Not your circumstances, not your opportunities, not the size of your actions, but your awareness of what those actions can carry when love inhabits them. Your ordinary day, filled with ordinary tasks, becomes a field of infinite potential. Because every tiny deed is an opening. Every small moment is a chance to say yes to love in a world that says no to it constantly. This is why Thérèse's spirituality is so threatening to the culture of achievement. It suggests that the person changing diapers in a hidden apartment might be closer to God than the person on stage being applauded by thousands. It suggests that visibility has nothing to do with holiness. It suggests that you cannot judge someone's spiritual state by their accomplishments, because the things that matter most to God are often the things no one else ever sees. Let me ask you, what would change if you really believed this? If you stopped waiting for impressive opportunities and started investing completely in the small opportunities already filling your day? If you stopped measuring your spiritual life by visible progress and started measuring it by invisible love, What would change is not that you would do different things. You would do the same things differently, with more presence, with more intention, with the awareness that this small moment, this tiny interaction, this forgettable task, is actually the place where holiness is available to you right now. You would stop sleepwalking through your ordinary life, waiting for your real life to begin. You would wake up to the reality that your real life is happening now, in these small moments, and that God is present in all of them, waiting not for you to do something great, but for you to do something small with great love. This is the power of a single pin. Not the pin itself, the pin is just a pin, but the love that bends down to pick it up, the attention that notices it needs picking up, the intention that offers even this tiny action to God rather than dismissing it as beneath notice. Thérèse picked up pins. She smiled at difficult sisters. She did laundry. She swept floors. She performed 1,000 tiny deeds that no one remembered and no biography would ever record. And in doing them with complete love, with total presence, with the understanding that God receives the smallest offering as if it were the greatest, she became a doctor of the church. Not despite the smallness of her life, because of it. Because she proved what most people doubt, that you do not need great opportunities to become greatly holy. You need great love in ordinary opportunities, and great love is available to anyone, anywhere, in any circumstance, in any moment, including this one. So the question is not whether you have the opportunity for holiness. The question is whether you will recognize the opportunity when it comes disguised as something small, when it looks like a pin, when it feels insignificant, when offering it produces no reward except the knowledge that you chose love over indifference, presence over distraction, gift over withholding. The pins are everywhere, on the floor, in the conversation, in the task, in the moment, waiting not for someone impressive to notice them, but for someone loving to pick them up and offer them to the God who sees every tiny deed and treasures it as if it were the only gift he ever received. This is how Thérèse found God in tiny deeds. And this is how you can too, not by doing different things, but by doing what you are already doing with the one thing that transfigures everything it touches. Love that gives without measuring, serves without needing recognition, offers itself completely in moments so small the world would never notice them, but heaven sees and holds forever. The invitation is before you now, not to change your circumstances, not to wait for better opportunities, not to feel guilty about the ordinariness of your life, but to wake up to what is already there, to the pins scattered across the floor of your daily existence, to the tiny deeds that fill your hours, to the small moments that seem too insignificant to matter but are actually the very place where God is waiting to meet you. You can pick one up today, right now. Whatever small thing presents itself in this moment, the task you were about to dismiss as meaningless, the person you were about to brush past without really seeing, the opportunity to love that seemed too small to bother with. You can bend down, you can offer it. You can do it not for any reward, not for any feeling, not for any result you can measure. You can do it purely for love. And in doing it, you can discover what Thérèse discovered, that the power of a single pin is not in the pin at all. It is in the heart that notices it, the hands that pick it up, and the God who receives even the smallest offering as if it were the entire world given back to him in love. This is the spirituality of tiny deeds. This is the little way. This is how ordinary people in ordinary circumstances with ordinary lives discover that they have been standing in the middle of holiness all along, waiting only for the eyes to see it and the courage to offer it, one tiny deed at a time, until the whole life becomes a luminous offering, and the soul arrives home having traveled nowhere except deeper into the love that was always right there, hidden in the smallest things, waiting to be found.